They dragged her into the courtroom like a criminal, accused of stolen valor and impersonating a Navy SEAL. The gallery watched with contempt. Another fraud who would be exposed. Commander Hargrove presented his case confidently. No woman had ever served in such elite operations. She sat silently, neither confirming nor denying, eyes fixed on nothing as her achievements were dismissed as impossible fantasies. Then everything changed with 5 whispered words from the judge that silenced the room. That silver star is real. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story of hidden heroism speaks to you, consider subscribing for more untold stories that deserve to be heard. Erwin Merrick sat with perfect posture in the wooden chair, her breathing controlled despite the weight of dozens of contemptuous stares boring into her back. The military tribunal room at Naval Base San Diego buzzed with whispers and judgmental glances. Her charcoal slacks and navy button-up blended into the room's utilitarian design, neither claiming military authority nor trying to disappear entirely. The worn leather messenger bag at her feet contained everything she had brought to defend herself, which did not appear to be much. Colonel Blackwood, the presiding judge advocate, adjusted his reading glasses and reviewed the case file before him with practiced indifference. At 62, he had overseen hundreds of military justice proceedings, and from his perspective, this one promised to be relatively straightforward. The gallery continued its quiet buzz. Another valor thief, a retired chief petty officer muttered to his companion. "Can you believe the nerve?" his friend replied, just loud enough for Erwin to hear. "Women in the SEALs? Please," someone else scoffed. 3 Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents stood near the prosecution table, one holding a folder prominently labeled Stolen Valor Case Number 4872. Their expressions conveyed absolute certainty in the case they were about to present. Commander Hargrove approached the bench with the confidence of a man who had never lost a case. At 55, his silver-streaked hair and meticulously pressed uniform commanded respect from everyone in the room, everyone except the accused. His campaign ribbons told the story of a distinguished career, including combat deployments and years of service in the Judge Advocate General's Corps. "Your Honor," he began, addressing Colonel Blackwood, "the case before us is straightforward. Ms. Merrick has been making outlandish claims in veteran support groups about serving in combat roles reserved exclusively for male operators. She has fraudulently presented herself as having participated in classified SEAL operations, including the extraction of a high-value intelligence asset from Yemen in 2019. Colonel Blackwood peered over his reading glasses. "And your evidence, Commander?" Hargrove signaled to a technical specialist, and the first projection appeared on the screen. Erwin speaking in a circle of veterans, her hands gesturing as she described something the audience could not hear. The photo had been taken surreptitiously, clearly without her knowledge or consent. "We have testimony from 12 members of the Downtown Veterans Support Alliance who heard Ms. Merrick describe, in detail, participating in operations that would have been impossible for her to have been part of. The first witness called was Martin Donahue, a retired Marine who coordinated the support group. She started attending our Tuesday sessions about 3 months ago," Donahue testified. "At first, she just listened. Then she began sharing what she called her experiences, operations in Yemen, Syria, places where she claimed to have been deployed as part of some special unit. When pressed for details, she would say the missions were classified, but she described tactics and equipment that sounded like SEAL operations." "And did you believe her?" Hargrove asked. "No." Donahue's reply was immediate. "As the son of a SEAL and someone who has worked with naval special warfare, I know there have never been female SEAL operators. It was offensive to those who actually served." Throughout the testimony, Erwin remained silent, her gaze fixed somewhere in the middle distance. Only the slight tightening around her eyes betrayed any reaction to the mounting accusations. Lieutenant Quillon, Erwin's court-appointed defense counsel, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The 31-year-old had been assigned the case just days ago and looked completely out of his depth. His cross-examination was perfunctory at best. "Mr. Donahue, did Ms. Merrick ever specifically claim to be a Navy SEAL?" Donahue hesitated. "Not in those exact words, no, but she described operations that only SEALs would have conducted." "Could there have been other special operations units involved in similar missions?" "Not with women in combat roles, not during the time frame she described." Hargrove called 2 more witnesses from the support group, each with similar testimonies about Erwin's impossible claims. Then he shifted to the documentary evidence. Ms. Merrick's service record, Hargrove continued, holding up a thin folder, shows 4 unremarkable years as a logistics specialist with an honorable discharge in 2016. Nothing more. He projected pages from her official military file onto the screen. Enlisted in 2012, basic training at Great Lakes. Assigned to Supply Battalion at Camp Pendleton. Administrative roles. No special operations training. No combat deployments. No extraordinary commendations or medals. Certainly no Silver Star, which she has allegedly hinted at possessing. The evidence mounted steadily against Erwin. Her personnel file showed a competent but unremarkable service record. Her training certifications were all standard for her logistics role. Her deployment history showed no combat zones, let alone the high-risk environments she had supposedly described in the support group. The accused has fabricated an elaborate fantasy, Hargrove concluded the morning session. In doing so, she has not only committed fraud but has dishonored the real service members who actually put their lives on the line in these operations. By the time Colonel Blackwood called for lunch recess, the case against Erwin seemed ironclad. As guards escorted her out, Lieutenant Quillen approached. "Ms. Merrick, I need something to work with here. Anything," he pleaded quietly. She turned those unreadable eyes to him. "My service record speaks for itself, Lieutenant." "Your service record is what is damning you," he replied, frustration evident. She offered nothing more, leaving Quillen to watch helplessly as she was led away. In the corridor outside, Quillen encountered one of the NCIS agents, Special Agent Thornton. "Tough case," Thornton commented. "She is not giving me anything to defend her with," Quillen admitted. "These stolen valor cases are usually straightforward. This one is different somehow." "Different how?" Thornton hesitated. "Just a feeling. Most valor thieves are eager to explain themselves, to justify their lies. They have elaborate excuses or they break down and confess. She does neither." "Maybe she is just committed to the lie," Quillen suggested. "Maybe," Thornton conceded, though he did not sound convinced. "But when we arrested her, she did not protest, did not seem surprised at all, almost like she was expecting it." The afternoon session began with Captain Reynolds taking the stand. As the officer overseeing SEAL training records, his testimony was meant to be the final nail in Erwin's coffin. "I can categorically state that no woman has ever completed BUDS training or served as a SEAL operator," Reynolds declared with absolute certainty. "Ms. Merrick's claims are not only false, but insult the men who have earned their tridents." Reynolds, with 25 years in the Navy and the last 7 overseeing special warfare training documentation, presented himself as the definitive authority on who had and had not been through SEAL training. "I have personally reviewed every graduate of basic underwater demolition SEAL training since 2005. I can assure this tribunal that Erwin Merrick's name appears nowhere in these records." But during cross-examination, small inconsistencies began to surface. Lieutenant Quillen, who had spent the lunch break reviewing his notes more carefully, seemed to have found his footing. "Captain Reynolds," Quillen asked, "how do you explain that Ms. Merrick correctly described the interior layout of Forward Operating Base Whiskey 7, including details not available in any publication?" The question caused a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Reynolds blinked, momentarily thrown off his confident stride. "Research," Reynolds dismissed after recovering. "Determined frauds do their homework. There are former personnel who might have spoken about the base layout, security protocols notwithstanding." "And the 3-month gap in her service record from July to September 2014? "Administrative oversight, it happens," Quillen pressed harder. "And her knowledge of the modified extraction protocol used exclusively in the 2019 Yemen operation, the very one Commander Hargrove mentioned earlier?" For the first time, Reynolds hesitated visibly. "I would need to review what exactly she claimed." According to witness statements, she described a specific change in extraction procedures implemented after an incident in Somali waters in 2018. That protocol modification was not made public. Reynolds glanced toward Hargrove, who had straightened in his chair. "I am not authorized to discuss operational protocols in an open tribunal." Colonel Blackwood, who had seemed half asleep during most of the proceedings, suddenly straightened in his chair. His eyes, sharper now, moved from Reynolds to Erwin and back again. "Lieutenant Quillen, approach," he ordered. After a brief exchange at the bench, Blackwood announced a 15-minute recess. When we return, we will address some evidentiary matters that have come to light. As Erwin stood to leave, her messenger bag slipped from the table, spilling its contents across the polished floor. An NCIS agent, Special Agent Thornton, quickly moved to collect the items. A worn photograph showing silhouetted figures against a desert sunset, faces deliberately blacked out. A medical report with multiple surgeries listed, and a small, tarnished silver star. Thornton examined the metal with obvious skepticism before placing it on the evidence table. Appears to be military issue, he noted to Hargrove, though anyone can purchase replicas these days. When proceedings resumed, Colonel Blackwood requested to examine the items personally. Your Honor, Hargrove objected, anyone can purchase military decorations online. This proves nothing except the lengths to which the accused will go. Blackwood ignored him, turning the silver star over in his palm. He studied the engraving on the back, ran his thumb across a serial number, then froze. His eyes darted to Erwin, seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time. The change in his expression was subtle but unmistakable. A flash of recognition, followed by something like respect. Clear the room, he ordered suddenly. When protests began, his voice grew sharp. This is now a classified proceeding. All personnel without Yankee White clearance, exit immediately. The gallery erupted in confused murmurs as court officers began ushering people out. Hargrove approached the bench, clearly intending to object, but Blackwood silenced him with a raised hand. That includes you, Commander, unless you have been cleared for compartmented information at the Yankee White level. Hargrove stiffened. Your Honor, as the prosecuting attorney, I have the right to be present for all proceedings. Not when matters of national security are involved, Blackwood countered. This is no longer a standard stolen valor case. As confused spectators filed out, including most of the prosecution team, Blackwood gestured for a senior intelligence officer who had been observing from the back of the room to approach. They spoke in hushed tones, examining the metal together. When only essential personnel remained, Blackwood looked directly at Erwin, his entire demeanor transformed. That silver star is real, he stated, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying throughout the now silent room. Serial and commendation codes match a classified operation in 2019. The remaining NCIS agents exchanged confused glances. Special Agent Thornton's expression shifted from skepticism to dawning realization. This proceeding is suspended pending security review, Blackwood announced, standing. For the first time that day, a flicker of emotion crossed Erwin's face. Not relief, not vindication, but something more complex, concern. As the tribunal room emptied, Blackwood instructed the remaining security personnel to secure all records of the day's proceedings. He then turned to Erwin. Ms. Merrick, I believe there are people who will want to speak with you immediately. I apologize for what you have endured here today. Erwin was escorted not to a holding cell, but to a secure conference room deep within the Naval Base's intelligence wing. The room was spartanly furnished with a polished oak table and 8 chairs, currently occupied by only 2 people, Colonel Blackwood and a woman Erwin had never met but immediately recognized by her rank insignia and the unmistakable authority she projected. Ms. Merrick, Blackwood said, this is Admiral Lorelei Taggart, Director of Naval Special Programs. Admiral Taggart studied Erwin with piercing blue eyes that had seen more classified operations than most flag officers would in 3 careers. At 64, her silver hair was cut in a practical bob, and she wore her 4-star rank with the ease of someone who had earned every promotion through merit rather than politics. You have caused quite a stir, Lieutenant, Taggart said, using a rank that appeared nowhere in Erwin's official record. That was never my intention, Admiral, Erwin replied, her voice stronger and more assured than it had been in the tribunal room. Yet here we are. Taggart placed a sealed folder on the table. Would you care to explain how your silver star ended up as evidence in a stolen valor case? With respect, Admiral, I was under direct orders not to disclose my service history, even when accused of fabricating it. Taggart's expression softened marginally. Those orders placed you in an impossible position. Many things about my service could be described that way, ma'am. Blackwood cleared his throat. Admiral, I should mention that I have suspended the proceedings pending review, but we have a courtroom full of people who witnessed the initial revelation. This will be difficult to contain. It always is, Colonel, Taggart sighed. The question now is how to proceed without compromising national security while also ensuring justice for Lieutenant Merrick. Erwin glanced between them. May I ask what happens now? Taggart activated a security protocol on her tablet, and the room's windows immediately frosted over. A subtle hum indicated electronic countermeasures against surveillance had been engaged. Now, the Admiral said, we determine how much of the truth can be acknowledged without compromising ongoing operations. 3 hours later, Erwin found herself back in the tribunal room, but the atmosphere had transformed completely. Most spectators had not been readmitted, and the formerly crowded gallery now held only a handful of people with the highest security clearances. Commander Hargrove sat at the prosecution table, his earlier confidence replaced by visible confusion. Lieutenant Quillen appeared equally bewildered by the turn of events. Colonel Blackwood called the modified proceeding to order. After reviewing evidence that cannot be disclosed in this setting, I am issuing a summary judgment in this matter, he announced formally. All charges against Erwin Merrick are hereby dismissed. The record of these proceedings will be sealed under national security provisions. Hargrove rose to his feet. Your Honor, with all due respect, I have not been given any explanation for this extraordinary action. As the prosecuting officer, I have the right to understand the basis for dismissal. Commander, you do not have the clearance necessary for that explanation, Blackwood replied firmly. You will receive appropriate documentation indicating that this case has been resolved at a higher classification level than your current authorization permits. This is highly irregular, Hargrove protested. So was bringing charges without a complete investigation, Blackwood countered, his tone making it clear the discussion was over. This tribunal is adjourned. As the room cleared, Erwin remained seated, feeling strangely hollow despite her vindication. Admiral Taggart approached, accompanied by a civilian whose nondescript appearance belied his importance in intelligence circles. Lieutenant Merrick, this is Director Calloway from Naval Intelligence, Taggart introduced. He will brief you on your status moving forward. Calloway nodded. We would like you to accompany us to a more secure location. There are matters to discuss regarding both your past service and your future options. Erwin gathered her belongings, carefully returning the silver star to her messenger bag. As they prepared to leave, Commander Hargrove intercepted them. Ms. Merrick, he began, his expression a mixture of confusion and grudging respect. I feel I am owed some explanation. Admiral Taggart intervened. Commander, you performed your duty based on the information available to you. Sometimes that information is incomplete by necessity. Consider this matter closed. As they turned to leave, Hargrove addressed Erwin directly. Were you really there, in Yemen? Erwin met his gaze steadily. Commander, I can neither confirm nor deny the specifics of my service record. But you served, he pressed. In some capacity that earned you that medal. She allowed herself the smallest of smiles. I served my country, Commander. The rest remains classified. The secure facility they brought her to was located 30 miles inland, a nondescript building that few would recognize as one of Naval Intelligence's most sensitive operational planning centers. In a conference room with no windows and multiple layers of security, Erwin finally received the acknowledgement of her service that had been denied her for years. Admiral Taggart's weathered hands rested on a folder stamped, Umbra 7, Absolute Top Secret. Across from her sat Erwin, Director Calloway, and two other individuals, Captain Vega, current head of Special Warfare Development Group, and Dr. Elise Harrington, the psychologist who had helped design the selection process for what they were about to discuss. The Selkie program, Taggart began, was conceived in 2012 as a response to evolving threats in environments where traditional SEAL operators were at a disadvantage. Erwin's voice, when she finally spoke freely, carried the quiet authority of someone who had commanded in the field. We were not SEALs. We never claimed to be. We were something else entirely. 16 women, Taggart continued, trained to the same physical and tactical standards but deployed for missions requiring different skill sets. Environments where male operators would be immediately identified, extractions where a female operative could move undetected. She slid several photographs across the table, women in nondescript clothing moving through markets in Yemen, Syria, Iran. Another showed them in tactical gear, faces obscured, in what appeared to be a training facility. The program was terminated after the Yemen extraction, political pressures, budget cuts, but mostly fear of public reaction if it ever came to light. Your records were sanitized, your achievements classified, Your medals awarded in private ceremonies. And then we were cut loose, Erwin added, a hint of bitterness coloring her words. Told to reintegrate into civilian life with no acknowledgement of what we had done or what we had survived. Dr. Harrington leaned forward. The psychological impact of that transition was severely underestimated. We failed you all in that regard. You did, Erwin agreed bluntly. Do you know what it is like to wake up screaming from nightmares you cannot explain to anyone? To seek treatment for PTSD from doctors who think you are either lying or delusional when you hint at the source of your trauma? Captain Vega, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. That is why we are here today, Lieutenant. The situation has become untenable. You are not the first Selkie operator to encounter problems with your cover story. The others, Erwin asked immediately, concern evident in her voice. Sorsha, Isolde, Zephyrine, Thora, Ondine, are they still maintaining cover? Most are, Taggart admitted. Some are struggling. Thora's PTSD was misdiagnosed because she could not explain the source of her trauma to doctors without clearance. Ondine's disability claim was denied. Zephyrine nearly faced criminal charges after defending herself using techniques that civilians should not know. So what happens now? Erwin asked, her eyes focused on the classified folder. Director Calloway stepped in. We have received authorization to implement what we are calling protocol acknowledgement. It is not declassification, but rather a limited disclosure framework. Taggart explained further. The Selkie program remains classified, but we are authorized to partially restore your service records, enough to acknowledge your true service without revealing operational details. And the charges? Dropped, with formal apologies, Taggart assured her. More importantly, you and the other Selkie operators will receive proper recognition for your service, including access to all veteran benefits and appropriate medical care. Erwin absorbed this information, her expression guarded. Why now? What changed? The four officials exchanged glances before Taggart answered. Your case forced the issue. When your Silver Star was identified in open court, it created a situation that could not be contained through normal channels. We had to make a choice, continue denying the existence of highly decorated female operators and risk greater exposure, or acknowledge a limited version of the truth. So it was not concern for our well-being, Erwin observed dryly. That was part of it, Dr. Harrington insisted. Some of us have been advocating for protocol acknowledgement for years. Your case simply provided the leverage needed to overcome institutional resistance. Captain Vega added, there is another factor. The capabilities demonstrated by the Selkie program proved too valuable to abandon entirely. There is discussion of reviving certain aspects under a more transparent framework. Erwin's eyes narrowed. You want to recruit more women. We want to stop wasting the talents of operators like you, Vega corrected. Both those who served in Selkie and those who could serve in whatever comes next. Admiral Taggart slid a document across the table. This requires your signature. It acknowledges your service in a classified special operations capacity without revealing operational details. It permits the restoration of your proper rank and decorations to your official record, and it establishes your eligibility for all appropriate benefits. Erwin studied the document carefully. And the others? We are contacting them individually. Most have already signed. After reading every word, Erwin signed the document. What about Commander Hargrove and the others involved in my case? They will receive appropriate security briefings, Director Calloway explained. Nothing that compromises operational security, but enough to understand that they were mistaken about your service. Will there be a public statement? Taggart shook her head. No. She handed Erwin a small velvet box. But there will be a private ceremony. This time you can wear your medals openly among those cleared to know. Inside the box was a replacement Silver Star, gleaming and new, unlike the worn one Erwin had kept hidden for years. 1 month from today, Taggart continued, there will be a closed ceremony at the Pentagon. The Secretary of the Navy will personally recognize the service of all Selkie operators who choose to attend. For the first time since her arrest, Erwin allowed herself to feel something close to peace. Not complete vindication, not full justice, but acknowledgement. Recognition of the truth she had been forced to deny. And after the ceremony? She asked. Captain Vega leaned forward. That depends on you. Some of your colleagues have expressed interest in advisory roles for the program's potential successor. Others prefer to move on with their civilian lives, with their service properly acknowledged. I need time to consider my options, Erwin said. Of course, Taggart agreed. But know this, Lieutenant Merrick. The Navy recognizes that it failed you and your team. We cannot undo that failure, but we can ensure it never happens again. As the meeting concluded, Erwin was escorted to temporary quarters on the base. Walking beside her, Dr. Harrington spoke quietly. The healing process will take time, she said, but acknowledging the truth of your service is the first step. Erwin nodded. For years I was told that my greatest service to my country was pretending I had never served at all. That contradiction tears at the soul. I know, Harrington replied simply, and I am truly sorry we asked that of you. In her assigned quarters, Erwin placed the velvet box containing her new silver star on the bedside table and removed the worn original from her bag. She had carried it as both a reminder and a talisman, the only tangible proof that her memories were real, that her sacrifices had mattered. Now, she had been given permission to remember openly, to acknowledge her own history. She slept better that night than she had in years. The 6 months following her tribunal passed in a blur of briefings, medical evaluations, and carefully orchestrated reunions. Erwin found herself at the center of a classified rectification process that balanced national security with long overdue recognition. Today, standing in a private ceremony room at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in San Diego, Erwin watched as Admiral Taggart pinned medals on the uniforms of 5 women who had once been ghosts in the military system. Saoirse Vanner, with her characteristic Scottish accent and steady hands that had performed emergency surgery in a moving vehicle during the Damascus extraction. Isolde Renault, whose linguistic skills and cultural knowledge had made her invaluable in North Africa. Zephyrine Kavas, the team's demolitions expert with an artist's touch for making destruction look like accidents. Thora Bergstrom, their communications specialist who could hack into systems that were supposedly unhackable. And Ondine Nassar, whose mixed Lebanese heritage had allowed her to move undetected through environments where American operators would have been immediately compromised. These 5, along with Erwin, were the only Selkie operators willing to step forward, even in this limited capacity. The others remained in deep cover, their service still completely classified, by either necessity or choice. The ceremony itself was closed to the public. Only individuals with appropriate security clearance were permitted to attend, creating an audience of about 30 people, most of them high-ranking military or intelligence officials. In the back row sat Commander Hargrove, his expression thoughtful as he watched the proceedings. Admiral Taggart addressed the small gathering. Today, we acknowledge the extraordinary service of these operators, whose missions required them to work in complete secrecy, often without the recognition traditionally afforded to those who serve with such distinction. She turned to face the 6 women directly. On behalf of a grateful nation, I present these formal recognition documents. While the specifics of your operations remain classified, your service and sacrifice will no longer be denied. One by one, each woman received a leather portfolio containing their restored service records. Years of missions, training, and achievements that had been systematically erased were now officially acknowledged, even if most details remained redacted. When Taggart reached Erwin, she spoke quietly, for her ears alone. Your Silver Star citation has been properly entered into the record. The President sends his personal gratitude for the Yemen operation. Erwin accepted the portfolio with steady hands. Thank you, Admiral. After the ceremony, a small reception allowed the honored operators to speak with officials who had been involved with the Selkie program or its aftermath. Captain Vega approached Erwin with 2 glasses of sparkling water, offering one to her. Quite a change from 6 months ago, he observed. Indeed, Erwin agreed, taking the glass. Though most people will never know about any of this. True service rarely comes with public accolades, Vega said. But I wanted to let you know that the framework you and your team created is being used to develop the next generation of special operations capabilities, gender integrated, with proper recognition protocols built in from the start. Progress, then, Erwin acknowledged with a slight smile. Slow but steady, Vega confirmed. I also wanted to mention that we have a position available, if you are interested. Training and development. Your experiences would be invaluable to the program. I will consider it, Erwin said. For now, I am still adjusting to being able to acknowledge my own past. Across the room, she noticed Commander Hargrove speaking with Thora. After a moment, he seemed to feel her gaze and looked up. With a nod of acknowledgement, he excused himself and made his way over to her. Lieutenant Merrick, he greeted her formally. Commander, she replied, I admit I am surprised to see you here. Hargrove straightened his shoulders. I requested permission to attend. It seemed important to understand the full context of what happened in that tribunal room. And do you understand now? As much as my clearance level allows, he said. Enough to know that I owe you more than an apology. We all do. Erwin studied him for a moment. You were doing your job, Commander. You had no way of knowing. That is precisely the problem, Hargrove said with unexpected intensity. The system was designed to make your service invisible, even to those of us within it. That invisibility nearly resulted in a grave injustice. The system is changing, Erwin observed. Slowly, but it is changing. Because of you, Hargrove pointed out. Had you not been arrested, had your silver star not been discovered in that courtroom, how many more years would you and the others have remained unacknowledged? Erwin had no answer for that. The question had haunted her through many sleepless nights. In any case, Hargrove continued, I wanted you to know that I have submitted a formal recommendation regarding protocol changes for stolen valor cases involving potentially classified service records. No one else should have to endure what you did. Thank you, Commander. That is more meaningful than you might realize. As Hargrove moved away, Erwin felt a presence at her side and turned to find Saoirse. Strange to be visible, is it not? The Scottish woman asked quietly. Very, Erwin agreed. How are you adjusting? Better now that my therapist has clearance to know why I wake up screaming about certain topics, Saoirse said with grim humor. And you? Day by day, Erwin admitted. The nightmares are less frequent. Saoirse nodded toward Zephyrin, who was deep in conversation with Director Calloway. She is taking the advisory position with the new program, Thora as well. And you? I am returning to medical school, Saoirse said, finishing what I started before all this. With proper recognition of my service, my application has been accepted at Johns Hopkins. That is wonderful, Erwin said sincerely. What about you? Will you take their offer? Erwin considered the question. I am not sure yet. Part of me wants to ensure the next generation does not face what we did. Another part wants to close this chapter entirely. Whatever you decide, Saoirse said, at least now it truly is your choice. After the reception, Erwin found herself lingering in the empty ceremony room, looking at the framed photographs that had been temporarily displayed for the event. Images carefully selected to acknowledge their service without revealing operational details. Her team during training exercises, faces visible but locations classified. Group shots after mission completions, with backgrounds digitally altered to obscure sensitive information. Admiral Taggart returned, finding her there. Processing everything? Erwin nodded. It is strange to see these images displayed openly, even in this limited setting. Too little, too late? Taggart asked perceptively. Perhaps, Erwin admitted, but better than the alternative of continued erasure. Taggart moved to stand beside her, studying the photographs. You know, when the Selkie program was first proposed, I was against it. Why? Not because I doubted women could handle the missions, Taggart clarified, but because I feared exactly what happened, that the classified nature of the program would leave its operators vulnerable after their service ended. Yet you eventually supported it, Erwin observed. Because the women selected, including you, made it clear you understood the risks and were willing to accept them for the chance to serve in that capacity, Taggart said. I still wonder if we should have found another way. The missions needed to be done, Erwin said simply. We were the right people to do them. Yes, you were, Taggart agreed. And now we have the chance to ensure that the next generation of operators receives the recognition they deserve, even when the missions themselves remain classified. After leaving the ceremony, Erwin drove to the Veterans Administration Hospital across town. Unlike her previous visits, she now carried proper documentation of her service and the medical conditions resulting from it. The difference was immediately apparent as she checked in at the specialized PTSD treatment center. Dr. Maxwell, the lead psychiatrist, welcomed her into his office. "Lieutenant Merrick, I have reviewed your updated file. I want to apologize for the challenges you faced in seeking treatment previously." "You had no way of knowing," Erwin said, echoing what she had told Commander Hargrove. "Nevertheless, we should have systems in place to handle cases like yours," Maxwell said. "I understand there are still limitations on what you can discuss, but even the broad outlines in your file will allow us to provide much more appropriate care." As Erwin settled into her chair, she felt a weight lifting that she had carried for years, the burden of pretending to be less than she was, of hiding the true sources of her trauma and pain. "Where would you like to begin today?" Dr. Maxwell asked. "The Yemen extraction," Erwin said quietly. "That was the last mission, and the one that still haunts me most." Maxwell nodded. "I see from your file that you received the Silver Star for that operation." "Yes. We were sent to extract an intelligence asset whose cover had been compromised. The operation was supposed to be straightforward, but intelligence was flawed. The asset had been moved, and we found ourselves in a much more complex situation than anticipated." For the first time, Erwin could speak openly about the mission, within the boundaries of what remained classified. She could describe the fear, the split-second decisions, the losses that had led to the Selkie program being terminated afterward. Not everything, not the operational details that might compromise ongoing intelligence work, but enough that Dr. Maxwell could understand the context of her trauma. When she finished, Maxwell leaned forward. "Thank you for sharing that. I know it cannot be easy, even now." "Easier than pretending it never happened," Erwin said. "I would like to introduce you to a support group," Maxwell suggested. "Others with similar experiences, all with appropriate clearances. Would you be comfortable with that?" Erwin hesitated. "I am not sure." "Think about it," Maxwell said. "The group meets on Thursdays. Many find it helpful to connect with others who truly understand." 2 weeks later, Erwin found herself leading that very PTSD support group. The circle now included her former Selkie teammates alongside other veterans from classified operations. For the first time, they could speak about their experiences, if not the classified details, then at least the weight they carried. "The hardest battle," Erwin told the group, "is not always the one you fight abroad. Sometimes it is the one you fight when you come home, being seen for who you really are." Sorsha nodded in agreement. "For years I felt like a ghost, watching people live normal lives while carrying secrets I could never share." "My family thought I was exaggerating my symptoms," Thora added. "Without being able to explain the source of my trauma, they assumed I was seeking attention or benefits I had not earned." "That is why this group is so important," Erwin said. "Here, we understand each other without needing to explain everything." As the session ended, a young female lieutenant who had been silently observing approached Erwin. "Lieutenant Merrick? I am Lieutenant Commander Rivera. I was hoping I might speak with you privately." They moved to a quiet corner of the room. Rivera seemed nervous, choosing her words carefully. "Is it true? There was a program? Women serving in that capacity?" Erwin studied her, recognizing the look of someone searching for possibilities. "There was. There could be again." "I have been approached about a new initiative," Rivera confided. "They mentioned you by name, said you might be advising. I wanted to hear directly from you what it was really like, not the recruitment pitch." "It was the hardest thing I have ever done," Erwin said honestly. "Physically, mentally, emotionally. And the aftermath was in many ways worse than the service itself, at least until recently." "But was it worth it?" Rivera pressed. Erwin considered the question carefully. "For me, yes, despite everything. But the program being developed now is different. The lessons from our experiences are being incorporated from the beginning." "Would you help create it?" Rivera asked. "The right way this time, acknowledged, supported?" Erwin thought about Captain Vega's offer, which she had left unanswered until now. She considered the Silver Star now properly displayed on her service record, no longer a secret she had to hide. She thought about the women in the support group and the difference proper recognition had made in their recovery. "Some battles are worth fighting twice," she said finally. "Yes, I will help, to ensure that what happened to us never happens to the next generation of operators." As they walked out together, Erwin noticed Commander Hargrove waiting in the corridor. He came to attention as she approached. "Lieutenant Merrick, I hope I am not intruding. I wanted to let you know that the protocol changes I recommended have been approved. Effective immediately, all stolen valor cases will include a classified service verification process before charges are filed." "That is excellent news, Commander." Hargrove hesitated, then added, "I also wanted to inform you that I have requested a transfer to the JAG office handling veteran benefits appeals. After your case, I realized how many other veterans might be struggling with similar issues, if not as dramatic." "That is where you are needed most," Erwin agreed. "Thank you." As Hargrove departed, Lieutenant Commander Rivera looked at Erwin with new understanding. "Your case changed things, did it not? For all of us." "It forced a reckoning," Erwin acknowledged. "And while change comes slowly to an institution as large as the military, it does come, especially when the right people push for it." Rivera nodded thoughtfully. "When do we start?" "We already have," Erwin said, looking back at the room where the support group had met, then forward to the future they would help create. "Every acknowledgement of truth is a beginning."